and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Patreon-sponsored review time again, and wow, we're gonna have 3 Patreon-sponsored reviews in a row, and all of them are going to be comics! What a novel concept for the comic review show. As a reminder, I don't actually mind if people ask me to review non-comic material. It keeps things interesting around here, and 9 times out of 10, it's still tied to superheroes in some way. Other times, it's an audio drama spun off of a weird Doctor Who-related web series thing. Still, this show is supposed to be about bad comics, so it's nice when people patron them, and so many at once makes me happy. Although it did force me to push the next issue of US 1 to next year. Although what's funny is that US 1 is gonna seem much more plausible than what we've got today. We've covered the Ultimate Universe before, mostly in the broad strokes of large miniseries, things that reshape the entire universe or deal with many characters without much of a focus on the individual ones and what motivated them in their modern reimaginings. Well, as modern as 12 years ago at the time of this video's creation can be. And that brings us to Ultimate Iron Man, the subject of today's review. We've already covered Tony Stark's original Silver Age creation during the Vietnam War, and it seems like it'd be pretty easy to transplant that for a modern audience. Hell, that's what the movie did. And yet the Ultimate Universe decided to go in a very different direction. And I mean very different. I don't know if it was originally meant to be like this in Marvel editorial, or if it was pitched that way by the writer of this miniseries, Orson Scott Card. If you're unfamiliar with Orson Scott Card, he's a prominent science fiction writer, probably most well known for the Ender's Game series of books. You've probably also heard about him because he's kind of really homophobic. There is, as always, the constant struggle of separating an artist from their work, the personal views of the artist, however crappy they may be, from the actual person that produced them. There are several artists who are still regularly praised from their work and taught in classrooms, despite their horrible views and actions. As an informed individual, it falls to that individual to decide for themselves how much the author of a work affects their own perception about that work. Orson Scott Card also said that Star Trek was bad science fiction, which, yeah, okay, Orson, let's dig into Ultimate Iron Man #1 and #2 and see some good science fiction, I guess.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man punch, wears a pretty hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazons and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
Normally, while reading from a trade, I would ignore the covers, and I'll definitely be doing that for the second issue, but I feel the first issue's cover needs to be addressed. It features what I presume to be Tony Stark as some kind of cyborg, with complicated components and robotic fingers and a human face slapped onto a robot body. This cover is a complete lie. It's like it comes from an Elseworlds version of Iron Man. He's not a cyborg, and nothing remotely like this image is featured in the book. Were there 2 pitches for Ultimate Iron Man, and they just forgot to change the cover art? There is another cover for issue 1 that they used for the trade, and it's just a boring shot of Ultimate Iron Man flying up in front of what is either the moon or a giant onion, but even that is a bit of a lie. Not only do we not actually see Iron Man in the first issue, but Tony Stark is not even in the first issue. In a book called Ultimate Iron Man. Plus, being a book in the Ultimate Universe, I fully expect cannibalism to enter into this at some point. We open at the Stark Defense Corporation headquarters in New York City several years in the past. Said headquarters is apparently a giant glass pyramid thing in the middle of the bay, because nothing improves the morning commute in New York City than needing to get to your job by boat. Howard Stark is meeting with a scientist named Dr. Maria Serrera. On TV, you looked taller. I've been losing height. Funny, since I'm pretty sure the movie version of Howard Stark gained a whole foot. He's brought her here to show off some new invention, which appears to be the factory where they assemble the Blue Man Group. Stark hands her a screwdriver and tells her to stab the blue guy with it anywhere. She's a bit hesitant at first, but acquiesces, seeming to stick it into him. Back when science was trying to prove the important things. Like what happens if you stab and poke a dude? However, the guy doesn't even feel any pain, mainly because the screwdriver never punctured his skin. Upon pulling the screwdriver back, they find the entire thing is shredded into several metal strands. My god! Skin that can make bloomin' onions on the go! She's shocked that this stuff can do that to metal, but it has no effect on human skin. For 15 minutes at least. Next, to test its strength, Stark whacks the test subject in the chest with a baseball bat. It smashes the bat and sends him flying back. However, as Dr. Serrera notes, there isn't even a bruise on him. This guy's gonna be a superhero. I think I'm gonna name him Batman. If there's one thing this comic is guilty of in a few spots, it's decompressed storytelling. There are a lot of sequences where it's just silent as we see things slowly play out, as demonstrated here with whacking him with the bat. We didn't need 3 identically framed panels to show off the bat hitting him. Hell, given the speed where this happens, Howard making the remark, "liftoff," in the middle feels really wrong, since it seems like he'd be on the ground before he finished saying that. The lab assistant starts washing off the blue material, the test subject saying it's armor. Howard takes her aside and shows off exactly what this blue armor is by utilizing the most advanced technology that a super genius and his vast riches has at his disposal.
Oh no! Beta!
Sorry, I just have to laugh at that. He has this giant video screen to show off what the armor is made out of, and he's using Betamax. It's period appropriate, it's just an odd dichotomy, especially with the armor, which he describes as a bunch of bacteria that live on the surface of the skin. The bacteria, when hungry, will devour the skin cells over time, but if they're hit by something, they spread the shock of the impact outward. The force of pushing the test subject still sent him flying, but he felt absolutely no pain from it. My god. If we can add a rubber element to this, we'll have invented human bouncy balls! Screw bouncy play castles! Every room is a bouncy play castle! The bacteria also has a metal-eating parasite on it that will devour any metal that can oxidize. Hence why it turned the screwdriver into something that you would weed out of your garden. It has its issues, though. It can't stop a bullet because of the speed it's going at, and if you don't scrub it off with soap and water in 3 hours, it eats away all your skin. Just slap a warning label on it, and any kid that doesn't listen will just get to enjoy being the best Attack on Titan cosplayer ever! Dr. Serrera wants to know what this has to do with her, since her field of study is genetics. Stark says it's because she specializes in regeneration and regrowing lost body parts. Her work, however, has been slow. She has been able to regrow limbs, it just takes a few decades. And boy was it embarrassing when they accidentally grew a second left arm instead of a right one. Stark wants a skin that is constantly regenerating to be under the bacteria so a person could wear it pretty much forever. Ingenious plan, really. Instead of trying to make the bacteria not eat your skin, let's just completely rewrite how human genetics work. Don't get me wrong, regeneration on that scale is a miracle in itself, but Stark is asking for it specifically for the armor. It just seems like a not seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing. She refuses at first, until she sees the budget and salary she'd be getting. Unfortunately, the biotech armor is not popular with shareholders, as told by a news report, and Stark's stock value is dropping. We cut over to a restaurant, where Howard's ex-wife Lonnie is having a meeting with Howard's business rival Zebediah Stane. Imagine Lonnie Stark having lunch with her husband's arch-rival Zebediah Stane, and not a single paparazzo snapping our picture. Imagine Lonnie Stark giving exposition in a way that no human would say. I say ex-wife, but Lonnie and Howard's divorce hasn't been finalized yet. She tells Zebediah that she married Howard for his money, but he doesn't do anything with it but make armor that doesn't work. She owns half the stocks in the company, and Zebediah has been buying them up as their price drops. Thus, once they're divorced, the two of them together will own the company. And here we see them leaning in and grinning evilly to each other in a way that I used to complain was too cartoonishly evil and unrealistic. Nowadays, I think it's unrealistic because they didn't also suggest setting fire to puppies as part of the evil plan. We take his company and all his patents right out from under him. I think that makes you a snake, and me, another snake. Wanna have snake sex? And then 2 silent panels of them eating their food.
That was a great scene.
A lot of time has apparently passed as Dr. Serrera and Howard are now a couple that, well, Howard says she's his wife now, but I don't know how the two could be married if the divorce isn't settled yet, which it isn't, as we'll soon see. Speaking of, the two are discussing the settlement as she thinks he's giving Lonnie too much. Howard thinks he's coming out of this on top. For a guy who got rich making weapons of war, you're very peaceful. Just wait until you see our napalm bombs that spread peace and love. Dr. Serrera goes into her labs. Hi, Dr. Maria. Welcome to hell. Man, hell looks kind of boring. And science-y. Like, I don't even get why that woman says that. They're having a problem with one of the test animals, but nothing that's so horribly painful, and it looks like they're just running tests on samples right now. What is so hellish about this? Or is it because they're testing out a new armor that turns you purple that's spreading rapidly to everything around them? Anyway, there's a test monkey that's been screaming forever until they filled it up with morphine. Serrera reaches out for the monkey, and I guess that morphine wore off quickly because the monkey leaps out and attacks her. She falls backwards and the impact shatters her helmet. Huh. I'm pretty sure those kind of helmets aren't glass. They're meant to be a protective plastic that wouldn't shatter like that. Look, it was either proper lab equipment or a Betamax player. We can't afford both! It apparently shatters the entire thing to the point where the shards slice off the monkey's hand, some of its blood spilling into her mouth. Oh, so this is how you get a wishing monkey's paw. I question the physics of the shards seemingly flying upwards as we see here, especially since you'd think some of that would go inside of Maria's brain as a result of this. But hey, she seems okay. She's in science mode too, telling them to save the monkey, and they'll alter their plans by removing his arm to see if their virus, which is supposed to stimulate regeneration in the cells, actually worked. However, she also got monkey blood in her mouth, so she's suddenly feeling sick. It can't be the virus since it doesn't work so quickly, and they soon realize that she's pregnant. Later at the hospital, they at first refuse to let Stark in to see her because she was indeed infected by the virus, but he brings with them the lab notes proving that it can only be spread through blood, so he'll be fine. Then again, as Maria herself points out in the next panel, the virus is designed for monkeys, meaning it has jumped species and can mutate into something more transmutable, dude. I deserve whatever it does to me. Why? They're uncertain what the virus will do to her baby, though Howard makes it clear that if it's a choice between her and the baby, she takes priority. More time seems to have passed as we can see Stark with more stubble on his face. Lawyers arrive to give him the final divorce papers, which in turn brings us back over to Zebediah Stane's office, where Lonnie is celebrating with Stane their acquisition of all the stock, which we already knew about, so thanks for that redundant scene. Back to the hospital, Maria is in a lot of pain because of something they've discovered about the regeneration virus. It does regrow lost limbs, but brain tissue is constantly regenerating and building new nerve tissue. Basically, her brain is growing too big for her skull and she's in constant pain, not helped by her refusal to take painkillers out of fear for the baby, and the fact that when things are pressing on your brain, it kind of affects your mental state. However, she's still cognizant enough to realize how the virus will affect said baby. Somehow, without any lab equipment, he'll look normal and his brain won't grow too big for his skull. Rather, the neural tissue will spread throughout his body so that his entire body is his brain. So to recap, this is an Iron Man comic. By the way, considering how they keep saying the brain just keeps growing larger, what's to stop their son from having the same problem, just instead of inside his skull, it's the confines of his entire body? He will also experience constant pain throughout said body, like he had third-degree burns everywhere. So I looked this up. Turns out third-degree burns usually are pretty painless, mostly because the nerve endings have been completely destroyed. I get the idea of what she's saying. I'm just saying, great science fiction there with your brain-body child in constant pain, Orson. She begs him to save their child, and we cut to later still, where the stubble has expanded into a bushier beard. The blue armor has been refined so that it's lasted a week without any problems, and only the outer layer of skin is eaten away. The scientist has created a batch that will hopefully work for their son, but before they can talk any more about it, Stain enters, flanked by cops. He announces that he owns this place now and is shutting down the biotech armor division, with everything in it being destroyed. However, before he can try to mock Stark any further, there's a phone call. Surprisingly, he actually looks sensitive enough to realize, oh crap, this is awkward, even while he's being evil and stuff. It's a message from the hospital saying that Maria just died, ending the first issue. The second issue continues from there. He even says he's sorry to him. Obviously not for the company takeover, but wow, surprising bit of humanity there. The cops force most of the scientists to leave, aside from that one woman who was working on the project along with Dr. Manhattan here. Then you clean up here, or this stuff will explode, and don't get any of it on you! Or breathe any of it. A very weird statement to make, but these guys have probably seen Ghostbusters and know what'll happen if they try to fiddle around with science or containment units that they don't understand. As a result, the two pocket as much of the blue liquid as they can. At the hospital, they manage to keep Maria stable enough to deliver the baby, who starts screaming upon exposure to the air. Not just crying, actually screaming in pain. They try to start performing tests, but Howard Stark forces his way in and tells them to leave him alone, shoving the doctors aside and pouring the blue armor on him until he's completely covered. And with that, he's sedated and no longer screaming. Is that blue stuff FDA approved? We don't want to get sued. Glad you've got your priorities straight, Doctor. Huh, the father is randomly pouring some Windex on their baby. Oh crap, I could get sued! When you grow up and ask me, kid, I'll tell you. You saw your mother, and she held you. And your name shall be Papa Smurf. Actually, he's being named Antonio in honor of Maria's deceased little brother. The doctors try to take the baby away to be examined, but Howard, probably fearing for Stain's people or the potential ramifications of having Tony poked and prodded, forces his way out of the hospital with the baby. He manages to make it out of there. I'm guessing it was probably close to the entrance since security doesn't stop him, and we cut over to the Crystal Palace, where Stain is kinda pissed off. Probably because someone left a whole bunch of papers right around where he was sitting. Actually, it's because there aren't any patents. Nothing in the bioarmor project was patented, meaning there's nothing there that they own. We then see Lonnie engaged in making out with a biologist because, well, as we see throughout this miniseries, she's kind of a manipulative jackass who will sleep with anyone to get what she wants. Stain goes to meet with the researchers of the project, and yeesh, just realized that Stain is dressed like a watermelon. Anyway, he demands they write down all their research for them, but they refuse, saying they don't actually work for Stain. The bioarmor project was, in fact, contracted out to another company that Stark owns. The lab is just leased space. Stark's attorney, Boney Telford, that is a real character's name, and if this wasn't his only appearance in all of comics, I would assume he was going to become a bone-themed supervillain. Arrives to escort all their stuff out of the building. It's clear Stark and his lawyers knew this was all coming. Stain was the one playing up how useless the bioarmor project was to drive down the stock price, so as Boney points out, you should be happy not to be stuck with it. He then sings to Stain, I'm Boney, leave me alone-y. Because the bioarmor company still needs to provide Stark's company with samples as per the contract for the project, Stain's assistants think they can analyze those and reverse engineer them, but Lonnie shoots that down. Analyzing them won't tell them the process used to create the armor. That's why Howard never patents anything. You have to reveal the process. Given that and the huge, unnecessary island headquarters, this probably means that the company wasn't making that much money to begin with. Lonnie tells Stain that it doesn't matter, he'll still think of something, and that she's pregnant with his child, but he just shoves her aside, saying that he only wanted Stark and his company, and doesn't give a rat's ass about her or the kid. Because we do need to still remind you he's the bad guy after the brief moment of humanity we had before. The scientist lady goes to Stark, saying she'll help him create more of the bioarmor, but what's more, she's not going to be safe anymore. Stain has a reputation of bad behavior, and it's likely anyone who's ever worked with Howard on this project is in danger. And we see that in action, as the bald test subject, Nero, is kidnapped by Stain's men, beaten up when he refuses to give the formula, and has some kind of helmet placed on him. They later find Nero near Howard's houseboat, now mentally challenged. It's a message that Stain knows where they are. The helmet is called the Lid, and it was a military project that ended up making Stain lose his contract with the military. It drains all the knowledge out of your head and leaves behind basically nothing. The military ended their contract with Stain because it would be considered a war crime to use it on prisoners. You know, maybe these two companies would be doing better if they focused on inventing VHS instead of super blue armor and mind-ripping technology. We cut to 4 years later, where the group is now living in hiding in a suburban home, though Tony is still in blue. Nero is also living with them and is slowly learning again, even getting to where he can start to write. Unfortunately, Stain has been on the hunt for them ever since, and they've finally caught up with them. It seems they also implanted Nero with some kind of mind control technology, which makes his face get about 100 more folds in it, and they tell him to go to Tony's room and open a window, which allows them to kidnap him. And murder Nero with a pencil to the ear, too. Weird. Did he do that to himself? Did one of Stain's agents do it? Why even kill him at all? Anyway, Howard sees the van they're using and shoots a tracker onto it. Tony is brought to a warehouse where Stain and the scientist with the lid are waiting. The lid won't work on him because of the metal needles it uses, but they know they can wash off the bioarmor. Dumb question, but why are they even trying this? What do they think the 4-year-old knows about this stuff? Hell, why did they wait 4 years to do this? If they had the mind control technology, why not just have Nero reveal their location a lot sooner? As soon as they wash off the armor on his head, he starts screaming. What's causing him so much pain? Exposure to the air, the touch of dust particles. Why do you think his father had him in bioarmor his whole life? Why is it only his skin that's affected and not, say, his eyes or his tongue? Shouldn't those be ultra-sensitive too? And so our comic ends with Stain pushing the device onto his head, probably in preparation for making a clone of an internet reviewer, based on my experience. These comics have a very negative reputation. In my opinion, though, they're okay. They are kind of dumb and unnecessary, though. Aside from the goofy science behind this, a few things strike me about these first issues. The first is that Tony himself is not a central character in them. He does become the main character, I've read ahead enough to know that, but for a book called Ultimate Iron Man, him becoming Iron Man should really be the focus, which goes into my next point. Some would say, well, this is about him becoming Iron Man. Except look how long it's taking us to get there. The first issue suffers from a lot of decompressed storytelling, as I mentioned before. Just a whole lot of unnecessary shots and panels that don't need to be there, but they pad out the length of the book and theoretically make it feel more realistic. The second pushes a lot of plot points out and feels more compressed, but not terribly so. That being said, we're still nowhere near him becoming Iron Man. And here's my biggest quibble with the story. It's just not very interesting or unique. The original origin for Iron Man was about a rich guy who used his genius to outwit people who wanted to kill him. More modern takes on it showed that he was a jackass who needed some humility. That's why the movie worked so well in turning him into a sympathetic character to us. Here, he's a super genius born with brain nerves throughout his body, involved in a war between two corporations, and needs to wear blue skin paint, which he won't need to do later. It's just lame and uninteresting by comparison. Hell, the blue thing might have at least created something unique if he still had to wear it into adulthood, but nope! Even the scientist lady said their next batch would make it so he could grow hair and have his normal skin color again. What we see in later issues is that he can even regrow limbs as part of all this. Yeah, this whole thing was so goofy that they later retconned it to say that this miniseries, just a TV show's invention and not his actual origin at all. Great science fiction, Orson. It was so bad they considered it in-universe to be bad science fiction. Next time, we continue our Patreon-sponsored reviews of comics with more My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And I don't know, maybe I'll save the world if I've got some free time.
That comic
Cover to issue 2, by the way, also never happens in the book. Why is it that these covers are telling a more interesting story than what we're actually getting?